The Bakkers lost control of their PTL empire. Allegations of fraudulent fundraising led to a federal indictment for Jim.
Jim Bakker was found guilty on all 24 counts of wire and mail fraud and conspiracy.
Pastor Jim Bakker once stood at the top of a religious empire that seemed impossible to shake. Millions watched him, trusted him, and followed his every move. But behind the bright television lights and powerful sermons, a storm was quietly building. Then suddenly, investigations, shocking accusations, courtroom battles, and headlines began tearing through the world he had built. But how did one of the biggest names in televangelism fall into one of the most talked-about scandals in history? And when the sentence finally arrived, was this truly the end or just the beginning of another chapter? From televangelism king to a shocking fall. For years, Pastor Jim Bakker was one of the biggest and most recognized faces on religious television. Millions of people welcomed him into their homes through their TV screens. To many viewers, he was a symbol of faith, success, and hope. Week after week, audiences watched him speak with confidence and energy, and his influence continued growing at an incredible pace. His programs attracted huge numbers of followers, and his ministry expanded into something far larger than most people could have imagined. From the outside, Jim Bakker seemed to be living a life many people only dream about. He had fame, influence, financial success, and a massive audience that trusted him. His name carried weight in the world of televangelism, and his reach stretched across countless homes and communities. The ministry he helped build was becoming a powerful force, and it looked as if nothing could stop its rise. To supporters, Jim Bakker represented inspiration and spiritual leadership. He appeared to have built a world filled with opportunity and purpose. As cameras rolled and crowds gathered, everything looked polished and successful. The future seemed bright, and few people imagined that anything serious could threaten what he had built. But sometimes the most important stories are the ones hidden behind the spotlight. While the public kept seeing a picture of success and confidence, a very different story was quietly forming behind the scenes. At the beginning, the warning signs were small and easy to miss. Little questions started to rise, and small concerns began to spread. Conversations that were once kept behind closed doors slowly began to leak out, drawing attention and sparking wider public discussion across many different communities worldwide. Then those questions became harder to ignore. Soon, investigators began paying closer attention. Rumors that once seemed distant started turning into headlines appearing across newspapers and television reports. Curiosity quickly changed into concern. The same media attention that once celebrated his achievements was now beginning to focus on something very different. Those who once admired him began to feel confused and curious, questioning what was truly going on behind the scenes that they had never noticed before in those exact moments. The man who had stood at the top of one of the most powerful religious television movements in America was now facing a reality that few people ever expected to see. The image that had looked untouchable was beginning to crack, and the future that once seemed guaranteed suddenly became uncertain. Pastor Jim Bakker captivated millions through his televangelism until questions began to arise that led to closer investigations into the factors behind his influence. But how did he build an empire that so many people felt they could not do without? And could the pressure that came with the success of his mission have played a role in his eventual fall? Let's find out. The rise of a televangelism empire. Long before scandals, investigations, and courtroom battles entered the story, Jim Bakker was experiencing a rise that few people in religious broadcasting had ever achieved. His name was becoming known across America, and with each passing year, his influence seemed to grow larger. Alongside his wife, Tammy Faye Bakker, he built something that looked far bigger than an ordinary ministry. Together, they created a television presence that reached millions of homes and captured the attention of audiences across the country. People were not simply tuning in to hear another church sermon. There was something different about what Jim and Tammy Faye were creating. Their programs mixed faith, personality, emotion, interviews, music, and entertainment in a way that made viewers feel connected. Many families welcomed them into their living rooms almost every day. Over time, they became familiar faces that people felt they knew personally. But what started as a ministry was quickly growing into something much larger. The movement quickly grew beyond expectations, spreading through television to millions of viewers and drawing in rising financial support. New projects were launched one after another, each more ambitious than the last. At the center of this success stood a powerful symbol of achievement: the widely known Heritage USA. Heritage USA was not simply another church building or ministry center. It was developed as a Christian-themed family destination that included hotels, activities, entertainment, and gathering spaces. Huge crowds traveled there from different places, and many supporters saw it as something extraordinary. For some people, visiting Heritage USA felt like stepping into a place where faith and family experiences came together in a completely new way. To many devoted supporters, Jim Bakker was a symbol of hope and encouragement. His teachings appeared to lift people's spirits and bring positive change to many lives. His growing success made them believe something truly powerful and meaningful was at work through his ministry and message in simple ways today. But not everyone viewed the rapid growth in the same way. As the empire became larger, difficult questions slowly started appearing. Some critics began wondering how such a massive operation was being managed. Others started raising concerns about finances, influence, and whether the growing organization had become too large and too powerful. At first, those questions remained in the background. But success has a way of bringing attention from every direction. As the crowds grew larger and the ministry expanded, the pressure behind the scenes also grew heavier. And hidden beneath the excitement and success, challenges were beginning to build. Challenges that would eventually become impossible to ignore. Pastor Jim Bakker, together with his wife, built Heritage USA during their incredible rise, which later raised serious questions about financial support and management. But could these allegations reach their peak? And would his followers remain loyal despite the controversy? Or would they begin to rethink the integrity of their leader? Let's uncover the shocking details. When the empire began to crack. Then came the turning point that changed everything. For years, Jim Bakker had lived in a world filled with success, growing influence, and public admiration. His ministry had expanded rapidly. His audience continued growing, and many people believed the future could only get bigger and brighter. From the outside, everything appeared strong and untouchable. But sometimes, even the strongest-looking structures begin to weaken in places that people cannot immediately see. Slowly, things started to shift. Quiet worries that once stayed in the background became harder to ignore. What people only whispered in private began to appear in open talks. Soon, those growing doubts spread wider, gaining attention and strength. Before long, what began as small concerns turned into a much bigger, public, serious matter. Claims and allegations involving ministry activities and financial practices began attracting serious attention. Concerns surrounding fundraising methods and the management of ministry resources started appearing in reports and discussions that spread far beyond church circles. What had once looked stable and secure was now beginning to show visible cracks. Then the situation moved into an entirely different stage. Reporters started digging deeper into the story. Investigators began taking a closer look at the details surrounding the ministry and its operations. As more information surfaced, curiosity quickly grew into nationwide attention. And suddenly, the story seemed impossible to escape. Television programs talked about it. Newspapers reported on it. Conversations about Jim Bakker started appearing in homes, workplaces, and communities across the country. People who had once watched his programs for encouragement now found themselves watching for very different reasons. Many supporters found it hard to believe what they were hearing, while others waited anxiously for clear answers. A lot of people kept wondering how such a successful ministry could end up under serious questions. With every new headline, confusion and uncertainty continued to grow among the public everywhere. People began asking difficult questions. Was there more happening behind the scenes than viewers had realized? Had warning signs been missed? Were the growing concerns misunderstandings, or was something deeper unfolding? As attention increased, pressure continued building. Perhaps one of the most striking changes was seeing how quickly public perception could shift. The same television cameras that had once followed Jim Bakker's rise to success were now focused on something entirely different. The same media attention that once highlighted growth, faith, and achievement was now following controversy and uncertainty. The story that had once looked like a journey toward even greater success was beginning to take a very different direction, and nobody knew how far that road would go. The allegations of financial mismanagement involving Jim Bakker became so intense that the situation turned into a national issue, drawing the attention of government investigators and reporters alike. But would the influential televangelist be held accountable for these accusations? And could his influence or reputation shield him from the reach of the law? Let's unravel the astonishing details. From the pulpit to the courtroom. Eventually, the controversy surrounding Jim Bakker grew far beyond newspaper stories and television reports. What had started as troubling headlines and difficult questions was now entering a much more serious stage. The attention was no longer focused only on public discussions or media coverage. The story had moved into courtrooms, where decisions carried real consequences and where the future of Jim Bakker's life and ministry would be tested in a completely different way. For years, Jim Bakker had stood before large audiences with confidence. He had spoken to millions of viewers, preached messages of hope, and led a ministry that had grown into one of the biggest religious television movements in America. People had become used to seeing him on stages, behind cameras, and in front of cheering crowds. But now, the setting had changed completely. Instead of standing before supporters and followers, he found himself facing judges, lawyers, and legal proceedings. The atmosphere was very different from the world he had known for years. There were no television-style presentations, no uplifting music, and no enthusiastic audiences waiting to hear encouraging words. This time, every development carried serious weight. As the legal process continued, painful moments unfolded one after another. The man who had once appeared powerful and untouchable was now facing challenges that could not simply be pushed aside. Public attention remained intense, and people across the country closely watched each step of the case. Many people who once admired him were left shocked and confused by what had happened. Some of his supporters stayed loyal and still believed he was being treated unfairly. Others felt disappointed and found it hard to understand how a man who built such a large ministry could end up in such a difficult and painful situation right now. Then came one of the biggest moments in the entire story. Jim Bakker received a sentence that immediately became one of the most talked about events in televangelism history. The decision sent shockwaves through religious communities and far beyond them. For many people, it was difficult to imagine that one of the most recognized figures on Christian television had reached such a dramatic moment. In almost no time, the future he once dreamed of changed completely, and the life he had built over the years suddenly faced deep uncertainty and doubt, with growing uncertainty ahead. For viewers watching from a distance, it felt as if they were witnessing the closing of an important chapter in the history of religious broadcasting. To many, it did not simply feel like the fall of one man. It felt like the end of an entire era. After being found guilty of financial misappropriation, Jim Bakker was sentenced. But would he ever return to public life after serving his sentence? Could he redeem his image after being convicted of financial crimes? And would his supporters ever stand by him again, as they once did? Now, let's explore Jim Bakker's attempt to rebuild his life after the scandal. The unexpected return. After everything that had happened, many people believed Jim Bakker's public story had finally come to an end. To many observers, it seemed impossible to imagine him returning to the same world where he had once been one of the most recognized faces on religious television. The rise had been enormous, the downfall had been shocking, and the public attention surrounding it all had been intense. For many people watching from the outside, the ending seemed already decided. They thought the cameras had stopped rolling for the last time, and there was nothing left to see. In their minds, the once famous man who reached millions every week would slowly fade away, leaving public life behind. They believed he would become only a memory tied to one of televangelism's biggest and most shocking scandals ever seen. But that was not how the story unfolded. After serving time and spending years away from the spotlight, Jim Bakker slowly began stepping back into public life. The road back was not sudden, easy, or dramatic. No massive crowds were waiting to celebrate his return. There was no instant rebuilding of the influence he once had. Instead, it happened gradually, one step at a time. Instead of disappearing completely, he slowly found his way back into ministry and television work. The same world that once witnessed his painful fall was now observing something very different as he tried to rebuild his life after losing fame, trust, and influence. His journey became a quiet struggle filled with hope, doubt, and constant public attention again today. For many people, his return turned into a powerful story of redemption and second chances, showing that anyone can fall, face the results of their actions, and still rebuild their life step by step. They saw it as clear proof that even after big mistakes, public shame, and painful failures, life does not truly end at its lowest point, and hope can remain for everyone involved in life. But not everyone viewed it that way. For others, his return reopened old questions rather than closing them. Some wondered whether trust that had been damaged on such a public stage could ever fully return. Others questioned whether audiences would ever separate the man standing before them now from the events that had once changed everything. And perhaps that became one of the most fascinating parts of Jim Bakker's story. Because rebuilding a career can be difficult. Rebuilding a public image can be even harder. But rebuilding trust after millions of people have watched both your rise and your fall may be one of the greatest challenges of all. Jim Bakker regained his freedom after serving his sentence. But could he ever truly be seen the same way again? Or would his past always follow him, no matter how far he moved into the future? Now, let's dive into the unending question after scandal and redemption. The legacy that divides people. Even today, Jim Bakker remains one of the most talked about and debated figures in the history of religious broadcasting. His name continues to bring mixed reactions, depending on who is remembering his story and from what point of view. For some people, he is still seen as a man who played a major role in shaping modern Christian television in America. They remember the energy, the large audiences, and the massive ministry he helped build alongside his wife. To them, his early success stands as proof of how powerful his influence once was. But for others, the memory is very different. Instead of focusing on the rise, they think about the controversies that followed, the investigations that brought him into public scrutiny, and the legal battles that changed the direction of his life forever. They remember the headlines, the courtrooms, and the intense national attention that surrounded his fall from public favor. In their eyes, his story is not just about success, but also about the serious questions that came after it. Over time, Jim Bakker's story grew into something far beyond one event or court ruling. It was no longer just about a ministry or a single career. It became a wider story of how quickly fame can rise, how far influence can reach, and how fast public opinion can change once doubts and questions begin to appear. In the public eye, as the story continued unfolding over time, gradually, it also became a story about power and responsibility. When someone reaches a level of influence where millions are watching and listening, every decision becomes magnified. Every action is examined more closely. And when problems appear, they do not remain private for long. They quickly become part of a public conversation that spreads far beyond the original situation. At the same time, it is also a story about faith and belief. Many people who followed Jim Bakker were not just watching a television program, they were emotionally connected to his message. That is part of why his rise felt so strong and why his fall felt so personal to so many. And then, there is the human side of it all. Like any public figure, his story includes mistakes, consequences, and attempts to move forward. It also includes the challenge of living with a past that cannot easily be erased, especially when that past has been seen and discussed by millions of people. This is why his story continues to divide opinions even now. Some see lessons of forgiveness and second chances. Others see warnings about trust, responsibility, and accountability. And so, after everything, the rise, the fall, the courtroom battles, and the return, the biggest question remains, one that does not have a simple answer. When someone rises to the top, falls in full public view, and then tries to rebuild their life again, does that story ever truly reach an ending, or does it continue to follow them forever? So, what do you think about Jim Bakker's sentence? Can he ever truly redeem his image after such a public scandal? We would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe.